Hi, I'm Erin Sarofsky.
And I'm Austin Shaw.
This is Between the Keyframes.
Cool. This week we're going to be talking about motion design culture.
Yeah, different kind of companies produce motion design. Large corporations, small boutiques. Every company or creative team has a different culture. But any company has culture, right? Any academic environment has culture. But what actually goes into creating culture is the same but produces different results. So what we wanted to do was to discuss the nuanced differences and how to sleuth them out when researching or interviewing for a job, because culture should be on your radar as something that's important to you. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a conversation that I actually enjoy and I make a point to have with students, especially as they're getting closer to their graduation, professional practice type classes, because I don't remember having these discussions when I was a student. You know, it wasn't something I ever thought about. I just kind of blindly went whatever doors opened and just sort of arrived at different cultures. And having done a lot of freelance, I got to experience a lot of different types of cultures. But it wasn't until a lot of years later that I even started to think about it, that, oh, wow, this place is different than this other place. Why? You know, and getting down into, you know, every place has a culture.
Right. And, you know, as a studio owner, I'm constantly thinking about, is this a place I want to be every day? Is this a place where my team wants to be every day? And how to positively impact culture. Or if I'm going to do something that I think might have a negative impact on culture, just kind of being transparent and talking about it, or coming up with a path to kind of manage expectations around, you know, all the things. I mean, because every single thing goes into culture. You can't just do something and think it's not going to impact that. So let's define culture.
Right.
We love doing these dictionary definitions. So let's define it.
So, culture, dictionary definition: the set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organization.
Yeah.
And so that's our broad stroke dictionary culture. And then we've got a fun one, a creative studio culture, from a book called Studio Culture by Adrian Shaughnessy. A studio is a combination of three things: the physical space, the people who occupy that space, and the work they produce. You know, and I think that's interesting.
Love that.
Yeah, because these days, right, even the first one, the physical space, I mean, we can talk about that in historically and moving forward, but over the last year, this idea of space, the remote space, is just as important in defining a culture too, right? Whether you're using Slack, Zoom, whatever, Hangouts, Teams.
Yeah. I mean, people talk about the long term, like how is this going to change the industry long term? And I think this is the one thing that we had that impacted the studio before, was the fact that we were all together. Yes, they're freelancers. Yes, some stuff is going to be done remote. Yes, there's some exceptions to the rule, but like the core team being together in the physical space is a big part of what makes up the culture. It's like the three things is, you know, one of the three things is the physical space that we all occupy together. So when you take that away from it, you know, we're all doing the best we can, but there is that one thing missing that, to your point, in Slack, in these virtual environments, it's really challenging to keep it going.
Absolutely. I mean, for teaching as well in the classroom, right? And I've thought about how, you know, during quarters where I might teach the same section of a class, but multiple times, multiple sections. So 2 different classes, same exact content, very different experiences, very different cultures, right? And it's part of that, this ingredient of, you know, the people in that space. But having to do it all remote has been a challenge, and it's, I don't think it's an impossible challenge, and certainly there are some hybrid qualities or affordances that
Right.
we could pull from it. But yeah, we're missing the face to face.
We are big time. What I love about having a beautiful space is you feel like you have to live up to it. You have to like do work appropriate for like this amazing space that you're in. So when we're all like in a spare bedroom in tucked away in the corner of your house away from your family so you can have some peace and fucking quiet, you know, so that you could just focus and do some work, not the same. And
Right.
you know,
Right.
keeping that level up in a less inspirational place is more challenging.
Well, that makes me think. I mean, it's funny. It just popped in my head. This lecture I recently checked out from an environmental kind of graphic designer, right? Because there's a threshold thing. It's like when you enter a curated space
Yeah.
or space designed to essentially transport you into a different mindset, right? And that gets very difficult when you don't have that anymore.
Right. Well, I'm very affected by spaces that I'm in. So like I can't work in an unclean environment, like with a cluttered desk. First thing I do is I give myself 10 minutes in the morning when I go into any office or just to declutter, put everything away, kind of reset back to where everything has its place. But when we focus and create our space, we're thinking about one, how we collaborate with each other, how we want our clients to feel about us when they come in the space. As this is a premium place with premium people that do a premium thing, and we have like a real point of view about it. The space says a lot about that. You know, it has our
Right.
work on the wall. It has space to be playful and to be, you know, at a table together, to have lunch together. It invites people to like
Community.
congregate. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, that's such a big part, you know, and you know, I think about some of these Zoom lectures and studio classes on Zoom. And,
Yeah.
you know, as an educator, I don't force anybody to turn their camera on. There's all kinds of privacy issues. So
Yeah.
it's not really ethical to make someone turn their camera
course.
on. But I invite everyone to as much as they can, because I let them know that I like to see them. I like to be able to connect with them. I like to be able to make eye contact, even if it is through
Yeah.
Zoom, just so I know that like I'm making a connection with them. And it can be challenging, you know. It's
hard.
for sure. Yeah.
I think like the key of listing out all these things is ultimately to get to this point of don't assume because something might be more corporate, it's going to have less culture. And don't assume because something is boutique-y and producing amazing work that they're going to have a great culture. You have to look at the nuances, and that's kind of what we're going to break down here. Because with going super corporate, you're getting a lot from a culture perspective, but you're losing a lot. And then on the other side, on the boutique side, you're losing a lot that you would get from the corporate culture. And then there's, of course, the
Pros and
nuances
cons.
in between. So
Yes.
so let's like bang through. So, you know, it used to be like for motion design, you went to like a company that did motion design. But now motion design is a part of just, I would say, everyday graphic design.
Right.
So
So every day, right, creative teams that would exist in any corporation, any
Mm-hmm.
brand or organization is going to have some varying degrees of motion design.
Yeah, it's-
They might have a really robust team, or they
Right.
might have just one or two
one guy,
on staff.
yeah,
Right.
or gal. And like we've actually been noticing a lot of this because we do Swarovski Labs, and we'll get people that are like, he's, you know, one guy at this real estate company that does all the motion design. They're doing all the social and putting things together and doing slideshows, and you know, they need a motion designer. And God, years ago, like that wasn't a thing. They just had
Right.
designers. A
Well,
designer.
the way I mean, what you just brought up, that idea that, and you know, and I thought about this years ago. I'm like, I wonder when it'll be that motion design is like graphic design, where you
It
can kind of
is.
do this anywhere, you know, because you could think about it was like, all right, I was in New York in the 2000s, and that you could work there, or you could work in LA, and then there were a couple pockets. There was some Chicago, there's some Seattle, but that's kind of it. Now it's like, you can find motion design positions
anywhere
the same way. Yes, it's become like graphic design.
Yeah, anyone with like a social media presence of any kind should have a motion designer. If they have a designer on staff, it should be a motion designer on staff. Okay, so corporations, companies, brands as big as Apple, Microsoft, Uber, Nike, Procter and Gamble, Best Buy has a great internal department. We talk about Sakani. He's at Cash App. You would never think, like, if I just said somebody's at Cash App working, you'd be like, oh my God, what is that about? Well, they do amazing work there.
Yeah, super fun branding. Having talked to him, it sounds like one of these ideal types of cultures where you've got some of the affordances of big tech and some of the affordances of a boutique, the best qualities of a boutique culture.
So cool. There's also motion design companies, boutiques, right? And those range from, 2-man bands, 3-man bands to 10 to like 30 or 40, which I would call mid-size. And then large scale ones like the Mill and, then certain things like Method and Frame Store have departments that handle.
Buck's got like
Buck's
hundreds
large.
now.
Yeah, they're a large company. I don't know if it might still be considered a small business from the government's perspective, but
but from the motion design
community, they're large. Large. Okay, but then you have these big companies that have created departments inside that have, and so each one has a culture, and it's how all of that kind of works together that creates the culture of that company or studio. Funny.
What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. I've been listening to The Way of Zen, Alan Watts. And
The Way of Zen,
Alan Watts. And, I love listening to Alan Watts, his different lectures and stuff, too, because he's just very entertaining and good ideas and all that. But this idea that there's this interrelationship, right? That it's like, and that a culture, like, it's made up of the people. It's always in flux. Right? It's always changing, right? It's not going to ever be. There is no perfect. There's no fixed.
Right.
But, you're a part of it, right? When when you go to a job, you are a part of that culture, right? And to a certain degree, you can influence that culture, right? You might have a lot of agency. You might only have a little bit. But, part of it is, and I think part of it is to recognize, like, what's the vibe? What's the vibe of the place? And we have another kind of idea. Like, ideally, we all want to be part of a sustainable culture. Mm-hmm. The opposite of that, toxicity. And what do those look like, right? And what are maybe some of the attributes of both, and how can you as an individual maybe shape that? And if not,
should you not
move.
Be there? Move. Yeah. I think that's like really, I think a thing to say is if you are not happy in a place, you have to leave. And it doesn't mean like just, I'm never advocating for somebody to fucking just quit their job. But like at a certain point, you have to take ownership over your own career and realize that you can influence it. So build your reel, get out. Take your time, get out, like that is the only way forward. If you realize like, hey, actually this environment is toxic, there are some qualities that I'm never going to be able to influence in my position of power or lack of power, like you got to move on, because staying in a toxic environment makes you toxic. It does. I've seen it like change people and their whole attitudes, their whole career. It's really unfortunate. So, well, let's talk about what makes a toxic environment. Like, what are the watch outs? So
what are some big ones for you? So for me, I'd say Well, let's start with you.
Okay, so I think first things first, like otherisms, any place that has like discriminatory practices. I mean, we have to acknowledge that a lot of the artists, slash most of the artists, are like white guys in motion design. That's historically what's happened. So it's going to take a little while for that to change.
Yeah.
And we're all talking
I've had
about
students, I've had black students come up to me and say, where are the black designers?
Right?
And I have...
Fair question.
Very fair question, you know, and
yeah,
it's nice. I mean, I'm thinking back about 10 years now, and I'm remembering my answer being like, well, hopefully you guys are going to help change that.
Yeah, change
and they
is
have.
happening.
I mean, it's happening, and it's nice to see that. Yeah.
The hard thing is when you look at like who's applying for jobs, like you realize like you have to create some outreach, and to do that, it's more than one person. So you gotta kind of you gotta make it a part of the culture to create change, right, in the industry. So I would say, like, take a look around. It's not going to be perfect right away, but like if you wind up at a place and you feel the otherism going on and like have some like underlying discrimination, you got to jump. You know, you got to realize that.
Well, what about? I was going to ask for you. What about like sexism? Has that been something?
Oh yeah, I mean,
experienced?
Like 100%. I don't want to like 100% rat out like places I've worked before because they're still around, some of them, but there was definitely a paradigm of sexism there, and I don't necessarily know that it was 100%. I don't know that there was a self-awareness about it.
Right, more of an implicit.
Yeah,
bias.
Yeah, that's the word for it, implicit bias. But also, like when I became aware of it, I was like, oh my! I was like surprised by it, disappointed about it, and then I left because you can't change that otherism going on. You can't see like your peers doing okay or less work than you, less than, and seeing them getting promoted and making twice as much. Like you can't unsee that, right? Like at a certain point, like it's your turn, and if it's not your turn, like you gotta go and make it your turn somewhere else. But I think another one is unrealistic expectations for turnaround. Clients, producers maybe don't come up to you and say, how long is this going to take to do? They just agree to 5 o'clock the end of the day. And
so
you're
poor communication.
Yeah, or no communication, not really asking you what it's going to be, you know?
So it's like 5 alarm fires all the time.
That's what ultimately it winds up becoming. Where every day it's an emergency and you're in DEFCON 5 or 1, depending.
Yeah, and that's stressful. You know, that's not fun.
Yeah.
I mean, that happens. Things happen. But if that's the regular, that's not a fun place to work.
Okay, another one that we wrote down is burnout. So.
Oh yeah.
That's a big one.
I can talk about burnout
because Austin's burned out.
Yeah, I burned out a few times, and it's. I think that a culture that, I mean, it's sort of, some of that can be that 5 alarm fire persistent. Some of it is just that grind, you know, and I know for me, some of it is personality too, but I know for me, I'm a person who I like working. I like making things. I like producing and getting in that flow, but I've also gone too far, right? And a lot of, there are studios that don't necessarily, I think this was big in the 2000s, right? Nobody was really thinking about this. Nobody was thinking about sustainability. Everyone was just working and grinding, and cranking. And so it can be, it can be unhealthy. You can kind of hit a point where you're not, kind of you lose the passion, right?
Yeah. So burnout is an interesting thing because I think that's a two-way street. I think that, for me, I mean, I'm a studio owner, so I want to not burn out my people, but I also have high expectations. So it's on my team of producers to kind of be keeping an eye. There are times where it happens and we get bogged down and then we just try and like really carve out time for people on an individual basis. But as I was saying, in regards to burnout, it's not only on the company, like you were saying, it's on yourself to know where you're at and to communicate it, and to not wait until you're a total mess to communicate it.
And if you've communicated that and you're getting no nurturing in return from that toxic. You're at a sweatshop.
You're at a sweatshop.
You
Yep.
need to bounce.
Yep. So that's all the toxic stuff. Let's talk about what makes a company sustainable.
Right on.
Or the company culture to make it more sustainable.
Yeah. I mean, that makes me think back to like Superfad. That was probably one of the first studios that I worked at where it seemed like there were some healthy work-life balance like implicit in the studio culture, that, you know, it was okay to punch out if your work was done at a reasonable time. Like there wasn't this, you didn't feel weird leaving at a normal time, right?
True.
You know, I think, you know, so sustainability, right? Allowing for growth, for fulfillment, where you feel like you want to be there and that you can continue being there. You can picture this as, you know, it's not a, you know, I'm holding on by the skin of my teeth here, right?
Yeah. There's also something from the Culture Code, that book, vulnerability with trust. So being able to just like share your opinions and being open, like telling people when it's not just having a culture where you can go and say, but where anybody feels comfortable saying, hey, I'm getting stretched a little thin here. Can you take it easy on me next week? Like having a culture where that's okay is good. And where you can have conversation about that is good. And that leads to like the sense of community, having spaces where people can eat together and talk, and it's not just work. And, you know.
And in terms of collaboration and being able to contribute your ideas without feeling like they're going to just get shot down. You're gonna get shamed for being, that's dumb, right? Like where everyone's trying to make each step of the process better. And I think that even comes back to class critiques, right? Building a culture of critiques is, you know, and framing it for students that this is what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to identify what's working, maybe what's not, what can be improved. Ideally, that's happening in your work, your creative work culture.
Yep. I think a sustainable thing too is just having really clear HR policies, you know, and that includes having regular yearly reviews so that you have an opportunity to touch base without like begging to get on the calendar.
Right.
And a year goes by actually really fast. So it's a lot to ask for more than that, to say like an official review. But I think having a moment where you can sit down and say, how am I doing? This is where I want to improve. This is where I want to go, where you can just kind of set goals, short and long term. And along those lines, having clarity for your reporting structure, I think, is really important. Who do you take HR issues to when you're on a job? Like, who do you talk to? I don't know, it didn't seem like as much of a thing when we were coming up, but I find now like people like want to know where they bring things to.
Right.
You know?
Have some certainty.
Yeah.
Who do I talk to? Yeah.
Who do I talk to about this? Yeah. Along the idea of like vulnerability with trust gets into just the ability to manage your personal obligations without fear of recourse. So like that gets into work-life balance, being able to say, hey, like I said, my aunt's coming to town next week, quite literally, and I'm gonna want to clock out at a certain time or have some half days off here or there and kind of maybe front load so I could spend some time with her. Like, it's really important that I be able to, one, do that, and then two, be able to offload some of my shit to other people. The thing is, we're all going to do that for each other. So you can't fear any recourse to wanting to have a life or to be going through a medical thing and just needing time to take care of yourself. You know, you got to be able to be comfortable doing
So
that.
support, nurturing support, community. I was curious. So is there, are there discussions about sustainability that you all have, and what are those like?
Yeah. We do have those conversations. We have them often. And you have to have them. They're uncomfortable conversations to have because I find myself saying, back in the day, I didn't get any of this shit. And
Right.
But I think like the truth is, like when you take a step back, we have to like get past that. It's like the idea of free college. Just because I paid for college doesn't mean that that was the way it should be moving forward.
Right.
Like it's just
Yeah. I mean, it's
anybody that's like
education is a right.
is
Yes.
a right. Healthcare is a right.
Well, that gets into the
Things
culture of a nation, right? What values do we want to invest in
Right.
as a nation? But that's a whole nother topic. But
Well, I
it's
mean,
true.
and that's like something that we are not experts on. But it gets into that idea though, like that, like I'm not going to be upset that now college is free for everybody because I paid for that's just not where I'm at. And so like if I take
what does
step
that say
back-
about a culture, right? What does that say about a national culture? if
culture,
we were to
right?
pay?
Like
Right?
I
It would
paid, so
say that-
they should pay. It's like, okay, take it down.
No, but I mean, what is the if we were to do that, right?
I mean, it would be
means that our
amazing.
culture values it, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah.
as like I have my immediate reaction, and then we talk about how should it be? If without these preconceived, this is how it was, or historically, or
Right.
blah 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 blah. What do we want that to look like here? Okay, so a couple more things about a place that makes it sustainable. I think is accessibility to leadership, being able to like actually communicate with the uppity ups,
Right.
and have
The upper ups.
the uppity ups. I think honestly saying thank you, like when somebody
Yep.
works really hard, to say, hey, I just really wanted to say thank you.
Yeah.
Like your work was instrumental in it being a success, and I really appreciate that. That's
Yeah.
like, that is usually more important than like paying somebody a little overtime.
Absolutely, which
Yeah.
brings us to like the super important point. What I hear from all the time from guests who come to speak to students is this idea of just being a good person, being a
Right.
nice person, right? That goes so far that actually, for at least a sustainability point of view, goes
Yeah.
further than just raw talent. Right?
Oh, totally.
Being a nice person, being someone who can contribute in a positive way to the team, which essentially is the culture,
Yep.
is priceless.
Yeah, everybody says it. Don't be a dick. Don't be a dick. Be a good
Right.
person. Be reliable. Be collaborative. Be open to feedback. Show up to work. Like somebody comes in and they're just kind of a monster, and you're like, oh,
Yeah,
You're gonna
all of a
ruin
sudden
this.
everything's on eggshells. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to work where I'm distressed. Like,
yeah.
you're stressed all the time. You feel
Oh
like,
my God.
yeah, someone's
Yeah.
about to explode. Yeah,
Yeah.
not fun.
And
I want
like,
fun.
yeah, exactly. Work isn't about like sunshine and rainbows all the time. It is work. It is production.
It is
It's
work, but
hard
you
work.
want to feel good while you're doing it. You want to feel like,
Yeah. Like what you're doing matters.
like I want to, and that you
and
want
you
to
want to be there, and that you're making things
Right.
that are important, and they are important. They're important to our clients and to like commerce and all of the things. Like there's a reason people are paying for this work. So I think that is like a really lovely place to end. Is like culture is both, all three things. It is place, people, and the work you create. So you are a big part of the culture of wherever you are, whether it's at a company or in an academic program. So, yeah. So don't be a dick.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Okay. Do we have any announcements or anything? maybe
Want to hear some stories, hear some culture stories.
Yeah, it would be really great to get some feedback on this. You don't have to rat out specific places. That's not like the goal of this. The goal is to really have culture be part of the conversation. And I guess that's it. It's been fun chatting, Austin, about culture.
Yeah. Until next time.
Until next time. Take it easy.